Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. We are a church of open minds and loving hearts, celebrating many sources of wisdom and many spiritual paths. Your faith, your doubts, and your identities are all welcome here. I am Heather Vinge Hansen, serving as your worship leader today. We're grateful to our service participants, musician Matt Schulke, and our guest minister, Rev Riley, for this service about angels among us. To give some introduction on Meg, she is a lifelong UU who grew up in Ohio and West Virginia. She retired after 38 years as a religious professional. Today, she is co-moderator of the UUA, and as important, she enjoys gardening, links games, and traveling in her teardrop trailer. Thanks so much for being here. And welcome to our visitors, newcomers, and those online. We're glad that you're here. There's a preschool playroom open for young ones just past the lobby, and groups for kids following the time for all ages. Newcomers are, of course, welcome. After service, join us down in the Commons for refreshments and fellowship, where you can find ways to get connected to our community. And join us every Wednesday for a free will supper provided by our cook teams. This week after dinner, in addition to choir and table chat, we will host a fireside chat with Allie Hanton-Ebert, who is the executive director of Rochester's Jeremiah program, where they work to disrupt the cycles of poverty. Supper is at 5:30 and programs are at 6, and childcare is available during those times. You'll also find more information about other events in your order of service. This month, we're excited to have our representatives from our justice partner, COPL, and today to share a little bit more about the organization is Carolina Pardamo, and I invite you to come up.
Excuse me. Good morning, how are you doing? Okay, so my name is Carolina Perdomo, and I'm the coordinator at COPAL's office here in Rochester.
My name is David Perdomo. I'm lead organizer in Southeast Minnesota.
And it's a pleasure for us to be here this morning and share a little bit about COPAL and what we do within the Latino community in the Southeast area. So, COPAL stands for Communities Organizing Latino Power and Action, and we are a member-based organization, and our vision is to improve the quality of life of Latino families in Minnesota. And I would like to share and talk about what COPAL does in and for the Latino community in the Southeast area. All right, so I'll give you some examples. First one will be Rent Help Minnesota program. This happened during COVID. So during COVID, COPAL actively assisted with the application process for the state's Rent Help Minnesota program. And thanks to those efforts, we were able to secure approximately $200,000 for Latino families in the Southeast, protecting them from possible evictions during the time of the pandemic. And the second one, we have our health and wellness program. So once a month, we offer no-cost COVID-19 vaccine events for our community, as well as health fairs in different cities to overcome language barriers, lack of health insurance, and misinformation circulating in the community. Our next program is we like to do system changes. And COPAL works hard to achieve system changes that have a real impact of thousands of families across the state, such as working to pass 2 bills. And the first one is the driver's license for all, and the bill to permit use of the ITIN on rental agreements to make it easier for people to obtain housing. So in the Southeast area, the Driver's License for All Act is a good support for our communities because we know that driving a vehicle is a basic necessity to get to our jobs, take the kids to school, go to the store to buy groceries, doctor's appointments, etc., since there is no public transportation system in the cities outside of Rochester and the Twin Cities. In addition, people behind the wheel are now required to study the Minnesota driver's license manual to pass the knowledge test and the road test, resulting in safer roads for everyone. And last one but not least, civic and engagement participation. COPAL does a considerable work in educating the eligible voting community about the entire process to register to vote in the upcoming elections and discuss the importance of elevating the voices of the community by voting, electing the people who will represent us in local and state offices. And how do we do it? By knocking on doors and making phone bank calls every week. So this year alone, more than 100,000 calls have been made, and over 1,500 doors have been knocked on, and we're still counting on. All right, so I have shared a little bit or a few examples of how COPAL has impacted and will continue to impact the lives of Latino families in the Southeast area. So we're going to be around here, so please feel free to come and talk to us, and if you have more questions or comments, we're more than happy to answer those questions. And thank you. We would like to thank Social Justice for choosing COPAL to receive this month's sharing plate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And during the coffee hour, I think we could have some great conversations about the work you do. So let us enter this time of worship with these words from our minister in the 1870s, Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes. May your faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light the way. In a moment, our opening hymn, number 128 in the Gray Hymnal, will call us back. Before we sing, I invite you to rise in body or spirit to greet those around you and wave to those online.
We light this chalice to mark our precious time together, a time to remember who we are and who we want to be, a time to remember we are not alone, a time to meet our deepest longing and joy and grief. We light this precious, always in motion flame. May it guide us and hold us in this sacred time together. We will now give and receive the morning offering. I know I'm old and I have white hair, but believe it or not, I was once a little girl. And I'm going to tell you a story today about something that happened when I was a little girl. I grew up Unitarian Universalist in a place called West Virginia. Has anyone ever been to West Virginia? Yeah, it's a mountainy place, and I'll just tell you that there weren't a lot of Unitarian Universalists there. We went to a tiny, tiny little fellowship there. And I see that you're going to get a new building, and you'll have contractors come and build it. When we got a building, the people of the church built it ourselves. We didn't have a minister. It wasn't too many families. And the kids all met in a house next to the very simple building that the people built. And what we did every week in religious education, at that time, we watched eggs hatch in incubators, and we watched tadpoles turn into frogs, and we watched snakes shed their skin, and we watched caterpillars go into chrysalis and turn into butterflies, and that's what we did, and we loved it. Well, one day we learned that the people who ran West Virginia, the people in the legislature, they wanted to pass a new law that nobody could have reptiles in their church. Now, they didn't really know about us, but who they were passing the law about were these other people who lived up in the hills who were snake handlers. And they believed that if you had enough faith and you held a snake, even though it bit you with poison, you would not be hurt because your faith was that strong. And what had happened in that church was a little girl got bit and she died. And so the legislatures didn't want that to happen again, so they wanted to pass a law to say no more reptiles in churches. So there were only 2 religious groups in the whole state who cared about this new law. The snake handlers and the Unitarian Universalists. So one of my early memories is going with all the families down to Capitol Hill in Charleston, and I was too young, but my older brother telling them how great it was to watch snakes shed their skin and tadpoles turn into frogs. The people in the hills, the snake handlers, they had a different approach to the problem. They prayed, and they were told not to worry about it. Angels would deliver them from this bill. And so when the bill failed, they thought that the Unitarian Universalists were angels. Now, this was a small group of scientists primarily who worked for Union Carbide and DuPont, like my dad, and not used to being thought of as angels. But when we were invited to the hills to celebrate with these people, we went. And here my memory might kind of blend in with the Waltons or something, I'm not sure. But in my mind, we had joyful picnics with music and fun, and we all celebrated together that what we hoped for had happened. But for me as a kid, I kept thinking about the people like my dad being thought of as angels. This was not something I had ever considered. But I thought it was a really interesting idea, and I started to wonder where else there might be angels that I couldn't recognize. So that's the story I wanted to tell you this morning. That happened when I was a kid in West Virginia. So now you're going to get sung out.
As Matt plays the children's benediction, I'll have the children up through 8th grade meeting over by the door.
They go so fast, they usually miss most of the singing out of them. I'm always like, not so fast. That's my general approach to children. Don't grow so fast. Please join me now in a time of silence. If you're crossed and want to uncross, if you're back at home looking at this, maybe turn off your camera and relax. You probably don't have your camera on, but just relax, everybody. We're going to take some deep breaths together. May all who are lonely find another's presence in the silence. May all who wrestle addiction find a way to lay down their burden. May all who are overwhelmed find a moment's peace. May tyrants tremble and peace prevail. May our better angels remind us who we are, individually and collectively, and who we might yet be. And may we know that we are never alone. So be it.
Thank you, Matt. Today's reading are words from Mark Vaught, one of the thousands of Unitarian Universalists who are part of the prison ministry of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. It is from a book called Testimony, The Transformative Power of Unitarian Universalism, edited by Meg Riley. Unitarian Universalism has taught me that I am not alone in my struggle to become a better person, and that there will be others to support me when I fall short. I do not have to be perfect, beautiful, or smart. I only have to be myself. I do not have to be wealthy or popular to make a difference in the world. I only need to give what I can give and to love my neighbor as I wish to be loved myself. Most importantly, Unitarian Universalism has given me a community, a family, where I am valued, not for what I can offer, but because I am me. I have learned that I am not insignificant and that I am worthy of love and respect. I can take on the world because I am not alone.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. It's so good to be here again. I've been visiting y'all for almost 40 years, since Elizabeth Katzman and I were religious educators together in the 1980s. And it's always good to be back. I've had a great time every time I've been here, and I love this congregation. So I tell you that both because I treasure the relationship and also because you may have heard that story before that I just told, because I've never recorded what I do when I visit different places. But then I realized I love that story, and I've been telling it for more than 60 years, so you could handle hearing it a few times. What I love about that story is how much it says about what this faith is, what Unitarian Universalism is. Every part of that story describes how we see the world and how we choose to live in it. How we relate to the natural world, how we relate to children, to power, to other people like us and different from us, to the idea of angels and miracles. After all, the curriculum I was growing up with, where we watched those eggs hatch and tadpoles turn into frogs and snakes shed their skin, that curriculum was called, Elizabeth, How Miracles Abound. Remember, it was from before our time. That was a 1960s curriculum. But that vision of miracles and the miracle of the natural world and everyday life is part of our faith still. We were basically being taught the same concepts which the UU musician Peter Mayer expresses in his song Holy Now, which I love. He sings, and I won't sing it. You're welcome. When I was in Sunday school, we would learn about the time Moses split the sea in two and Jesus made the water wine. And I remember feeling sad. Miracles don't happen still. And now I can't keep track of it because everything's a miracle. Everything's a miracle. Wine from water is not so small, but an even bigger magic trick is that anything is here at all. So the challenging thing becomes not to look for miracles, but finding where there isn't one. You can Google that song and hear him sing it. It's very beautiful. As kids, we were taught the magic of life, the presence of miracles all around us. The kids in the hills of West Virginia and the adults were being taught about miracles as well. They were told, after all, that the miracle of their faith would keep the poison of a snake from hurting them. They were told, after all, that angels would deliver them from legislation that would make it impossible to practice their faith. They were told to believe so strongly in miracles that they could sit tight and not worry. It would be taken care of. Both religious communities were learning about miracles and that miracles abound, but those of us in the UU faith were also being taught that we need to be an active, this worldly part of creating miracles, that we need to use our gifts and our determination to be part of the evolution of our communities and our planet. We were not taught to wait and trust and let someone else take care of it for us. My friend Elisa joined the Brownies in first grade. At the first meeting, the leader said, "Maybe this week at your house, a little brownie will help your mom with the housework. Maybe a little brownie will clean up your room." Elisa went home very excited and kept waiting for this little brownie to show up and do the things she didn't want to do. The next week, she went back and sadly reported that no little brownie had shown up. When the leader clarified that she was supposed to be the little brownie, she lost all interest and left the troop. Even as a first grader in a UU congregation, it was made clear that we were going to do it together, that the congregation was going to build the building, that we were going to lead the services, that no one else was going to swoop in and solve problems, that we needed to be part of solutions. So it was natural in my small but mighty congregation that we would have used our power to try to sway the legislature of West Virginia. Because whether we would succeed or fail, speaking out and using our voice was part of our faith. In that small, scientifically oriented, humanistic UU fellowship, Most of the people found it sort of humorous and, to be honest, had a sense of superiority about the approach that we took to solve the problem versus the people in the hills. But as a kid, I watched the outcome and thought, yeah, but they got what they wanted too, and they didn't have to do all the work that we did and spend all that time on the hill. So it seemed to me we were both onto something. All these years later, I still do think we were both onto something. I don't believe that if I sit back, someone else will come along to solve my problem or our problems, but I do believe that angels and help dwell in unexpected places, and when we can't go another step or do another thing, someone else might pick us up. Because of our social location in that UU fellowship, we were small, but we were largely a community of middle-class professional adults, at least the men at that time. It made sense for us to be at the Capitol lobbying. If the folks in the hills had even known how to go to the Hill and lobby, it's doubtful that they would have had the same influence. Because the downside of that UU belief in our power and our agency is that oftentimes there are forces beyond our control which no amount of raising our voice will change. And that's when we need some help of not being in it alone, when in whatever language we might use for it, we call on angels. Do you remember that poem that went around Christian churches and was on all kinds of cards and posters some years ago called Footprints? If you haven't seen it, I'll remind you. It went like this. And it always was a beach picture with one set of footprints on it. One night I dreamed a dream as I was walking along the beach with my Lord. Across the dark sky flashed scenes from my life. For each scene, I noticed two sets of footprints in the sand, one belonging to me and one to my Lord. After the last scene of my life flashed before me, I looked back at the footprints in the sand. I noticed that at many times along the path of my life, especially at the lowest and saddest times, there was only one set of footprints. This really troubled me, so I asked the Lord about it. Lord, you said once I decided to follow you, you'd walk with me all the way. But I noticed that during the saddest and most troublesome times of my life, there was only one set of footprints. I don't understand why, when I needed you most, you would leave me. The Lord whispered, my precious child, I love you and I will never leave you, never ever during your trials and testings. When you saw only one set of footprints, it was then I carried you. That may be how life has felt for some of you in your hardest times. We are each on our own spiritual paths in this pluralistic congregation. But for me, that has not been how I have made it through the hardest places. My friend and colleague Joanna Crawford said that this poem does not describe her faith life. Her baby daughter was diagnosed with cancer not once but twice. And I tell you this story because the daughter is now in college and lived, and it all went fine, but of course they didn't know that at the time. She said if she looked at footprints from that time, there would not be one set of footprints, there would be dozens. So many people, friends, family, her congregation, so many people, medical personnel, who helped her through those years. I don't know about you, but for me, that is a better description as well. One of the hardest times I've ever faced was actually here in Rochester, involving the Mayo Clinic. I won't go into details of it. I will only say that many people from this congregation and in the wider Minnesota UU community helped me tremendously, saved me really. When I needed coaching and hand-holding and support, I was never alone. I'm willing to say I was helped by angels. What are angels, after all, but messengers between worlds? In the Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Christianity and Islam, they are messengers from God to humans. In less monotheistic religions, they're called by many names, but there are always messengers traveling between the worlds. In Greek mythology, for instance, Hermes is the messenger between gods and humans and everyone else. In my time of need, the angels I met with were traveling between my confusion and fear and helplessness to the clarity of love and care and support. In Scripture, angels are described as super weird looking, with lots of eyes and feathers. That's probably why they enter the scene always saying, "Be not afraid." In my life, it's not that the messengers look weird objectively, it's that angels show up when my vision is distorted. My confusion and fear and dread and grief and pain cause me to be unable to see clearly what is around me. Linda Hogan, the Native American author, writes this passage to describe how it feels to be unable to see clearly in her novel, Power. She writes, "I'm without my bearings, lost between the elements of air and water. It happens this way that sometimes when a person sits on a boat surrounded by water and fog so thick, so deep, there is a dizziness. Without her bearings, this person loses her place in the world. She must sit still without panic and wait for a glimpse of something to emerge from the fog. Maybe there will be a clearing through which a tree branch is seen, or a shard of blue sky, a hole in fog that is an open place. Or it might be a wading bird that appears out of the thick whiteness, and since its feet touch bottom, you can tell which way is up, which way is down. You can tell where gravity lives. Then and only then can you believe there is something solid in the world. You must sit still without panic and wait for a glimpse of something to emerge from the fog, perhaps an angel. Could we name a shard of blue sky, a tree branch, a wading bird, an angel? Perhaps if these messengers of clarity help us to know which way is up, which is down, that there is something solid in the world. I don't know about you, but some days in 2024 United States living, I find it very hard to identify which way is up, which way is down, or if there is anything solid in the world. So many things disorient me, overwhelm me, terrify me, fill me with dread. What does it mean to sit still without panic? Which parts of me need to sit still, and which parts need to take action? Because spreading panic through action never helps. So how to identify angels for both things, for sitting still and for taking action? One of my favorite stories, which I read years ago, in Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, No Ordinary Time, The Home Front and World War II, describes a time when FDR absolutely didn't know what to do to overcome the overwhelming isolationism, and we've since learned pro-Nazism in the US. He knew it was urgent that we enter the war and that we do it strategically and well, but he couldn't figure out how to get the American people behind him. So he went out on a boat, just like the boat Linda Hogan describes, out of reach of cameras and pressures and photographers and media, to simply think about it. Of course, I couldn't find this passage again to get all the details exactly right, but my memory is that he stayed there for several weeks. He stayed out there long enough for an idea to emerge, a clarity. Eventually, the idea emerged to create war bonds. They would allow the government to amass a lot of money without raising taxes on people who were already stressed and who would resent it. I imagine that idea of war bonds emerging like a shard of blue sky, a white wading bird, clarity in his confusion. In this age of 24/7 news and social media and all the ways that our privacy is invaded, it's hard to imagine anyone, let alone the president, doing what he did. He went and sat on a boat and looked through the fog until clarity emerged. He got to find a place where he could sit still without panic. Perhaps to find angels, we need to leave the noise behind sometimes. So how do we live in this time? How do we stay still enough to be grounded and know up from down so that we are aware of angels around us, and also simultaneously stay active enough that we are using our power and our agency? On the day after the election, for instance, will we each know that we did our part as citizens in a democracy? Because panic will distort our perceptions. And yet we do feel panic because it is such a pivotal time in American history. Knowing that each one of us is uniquely located with gifts and limitations and perspectives and histories, our faith may call each one of us to act differently. But collectively, we are called to proclaim our shared values and principles. We can only do this together. We need one another's help and strength, whether to sit without panic or to identify the next messenger from within or around us to guide us. One way I stay grounded, similar to looking for a tree branch or a white bird, is to follow Mr. Rogers' admonition always to look for the helpers. Everywhere I go, I see people who want our country to heal and to function well, and I pay attention to them. Do they have halos? Not visible ones. Perhaps knowing I am not alone, that seen and unseen powers are within me and around me. Always, that ancestors and unknown generations live in me and in the earth herself. Perhaps knowing this is how to live our precious faith for one more day. If the hyper-rational scientists from my childhood congregation could be viewed as angels by others, perhaps a wide enough view lens can allow us to see angels everywhere, in our four-legged companions, in a shard of sunlight, and most of all, in one another's beautiful, bright eyes and faces. May we know that we are surrounded always by this heavenly and earthly host. And may we draw strength and peace from this knowledge. Please join me and rise in body and spirit to sing our closing hymn, number 1064, Blue Boat Home, in the Teal book.
Ocean
As we leave this place, may we take with us a sense of purpose and connection and love. May we know, as does one of our Unitarian Universalist kindred who lives in prison, that we can take on the world because we are not alone.